It's the 4th of October. We're recording at the start of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and in the news, there's a lot of talk about what happened with Optus. Today, we're going to dive in, take a look at what's reported to have happened, what could have been done to avoid it, and what best practice looks like. Welcome to Insights as a Service. This week we are jumping on the bandwagon, albeit a little bit late, and talking all things Optus hack, because we've got a sweet scoop with the only person in the whole world that knows exactly what happened and exactly how it can be mitigated. Darryl Turner, head of DevOps at Lightwire, but of course, jokes. We're going to talk in rough strokes, in broad strokes, base our discussion off what is currently known, which isn't a lot, but there have been some things reported. So our big disclaimer here is, of course, we don't know exactly what happened with Optus, but based off what's been reported to date, we can make some high-level assessments of what could have been done to mitigate it if that was, in fact, what went down. So with all of those sort of ifs, whats, maybes, cover our ass legally done, then let's kick off. Darryl, how are you? And also, where are you? You're in Hamilton, I take it?
I'm in Hamilton. Yep, I'm in the Lightwire office in Hamilton Central here.
Nice.
Lovely day. Yep.
It actually does look nice, which is weird.
It's pretty good.
Nick, you're back at home in Welly.
I am, and it's meant to snow tomorrow, so I don't know what's up.
That's weird. So look, let's start off with some background detail, right? So Optus has said that up to 9.7 million customers may have been affected. Their data may have been accessed by a third party. They definitely know that 10,200 people have had their data, including things like driver's license details, passport numbers, addresses, that sort of stuff, accessed. The interesting thing is it's not the biggest issue that's been faced by a business in Australia due to a cyber attack. The Canva attack was bigger. I've got some notes here that say that in 2019, Canva revealed that the email addresses and user login details of 139 million Canva users was accessed, but it's important to note that none of their private data was. So that, I think, is the difference here. And the Financial Review today reported that there have been 11 data breaches this year alone in Australia, where more than 10,000 people have had their data accessed by a third party. So it's important to note that it's not just Optus who's had this happen. A lot of businesses have been subject to an attack of some sort, but this is certainly the most high profile one that I can think of in recent times. Why do you guys think it's actually made such big headlines? What makes this one so unique?
I'd say it's the type of information that's been disclosed. Supposedly taken by this attacker. Identification information coupled with names, account passwords, all of those kind of things. It's kind of a bit of a treasure trove of that sensitive PII that it has the ability to make people's lives not so good if that is to be used for some nefarious things. So I think that's really why it's caught the attention, and it seems to have made a lot of people quite mad. Quite
Fair
rightly
enough.
so.
I think it's also a very well-known brand within Australia. It stands out. I mean, it's one of the big players in the telco market. It's going to attract a lot of attention.
Yeah, it's like a meme I saw today where it was my company's not big enough to be targeted by a cyber attack, and what it really means is my company's not well known enough to make the news if I'm targeted by a cyber criminal. Which is I guess to your point, Nick. But to dive into that a little bit, Darryl. So what is the risk for these end users? Like what's actually able to be done with that data, that the most obvious things?
Well, I guess you read through the list of stuff that was taken, and the stuff that screams out to you is passport IDs, things like that. So you've got someone's name, you've got their address, you've got their passport ID, Medicare IDs, things like that. That's pretty much everything that you'd need to become that person online.
100 points of ID, right?
Yeah, so it's this is people needing to go out and replace their passports, cancel the ones with those IDs that were taken, and basically pay their money to get all that remade for them. So that's a huge hassle. If you don't do that, it opens up the path to financial crime, things like that. People could sign up for loans under your name, all of those kind of things. They could sign up for mobile phone plans, all of those kind of things. So
it might be a dumb question, but once a company has proved that you are who you say you are in the sign up process, you provided that 100 points of ID, you've got passport, driver's license, Medicare card, whatever it might be in Australia. Do they really need to continue to hold that information, or is it enough to have your address, date of birth, and middle names?
Yeah, companies should delete that information once they've validated that user is legit and let them into their system, unless they have a requirement for ongoing proof of identity throughout the course of that customer's lifecycle with them.
Yep. Like these kind of breaches, as we've seen, are always going to happen. No matter what, people are going to get attacked and there's going to be breaches. The best way to limit something really bad from happening is to not store that information that causes something really bad to happen. So yeah, by all means, best practice would indicate that you should, not hold on to information longer than you need to. Integrate with existing, third-party providers that are accredited with all of the, the credit card information, things like that, PCI, things like that, so that, you don't have that liability within your business is what you should really be doing. And I think there has just always traditionally been, companies have that kind of habit of just sucking up all of that information from people, holding onto it forever. They may not even know what they're going to do with it. It's easy to collect, so they do. A lot of the, I guess, new laws coming out in various territories around the place are actually starting to enforce things like that. So, making sure that people are not holding on to things that they don't need to. And if they deem that they do have to hold on to that kind of stuff, then actually, making them criminally liable potentially for if that's exposed.
That's, I guess, one way to mitigate it, but maybe we'll take a step back. We'll come back to mitigation or how to avoid risk or limit risk in the first place. To set that scene, we're going to need to understand what happened. And it's important to note again that at this point, there has been no formal sort of, reason for issue, or I don't even know what the right terminology is in this case, but Optus certainly hasn't categorically stated exactly what happened to cause this, what vulnerability was exposed and how access was gained. But what has been fairly widely reported is that there was I don't know, Darryl, what's the right term? An API that had no authorization?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right, Brendan. There is no official details from either, Optus or, no official release from a forensic investigation or from the authorities themselves. From what various people, including, politicians over there in Australia, have actually indicated, is it looks like the access to this information came through a publicly available API that Optus had open to the internet. And, they were quoted as saying it's as if they left the window open for someone to just come in and take whatever they wanted. So, yeah, again, we can't say, the complete ins and outs of how and why that kind of thing happened, but we could, talk about APIs and API security and some of the things that you should kind of do if that is the type of thing that your business provides.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's talk about the financial review today. I read an article and they were talking about in their words, and I quote here, the company didn't even do standard quote unquote happy path testing on the system in question, much less penetration testing, leaving 9.8 million Australians to walk a very unhappy path for many years to come. So what is happy path testing?
Cool. Well, I guess, yeah, we'll start let's just talk about what an API is and
Fine.
why people have APIs and what could the purpose of this have been, right? So there's API can mean a lot of different things. What I assume we're talking about here is a web-based HTTP API. So these can be useful to an organization for many reasons. It could legitimately be a public-facing, internet API service. The point of these things being for other third-party software developers to integrate with your platform. Think of Google Maps, things like that. So you can go to Google and you can, look at places and go to places on the map there. But they also have an API that you can sign up to. And if you're building your own little application that needs to use maps and things like that, you tap into that publicly available Google API and it allows you to get data back and build stuff on top of it. So there's that purpose there. If you look at your software as a service, SaaS kind of model, mobile applications, things like that, user goes into Netflix in their browser or whatever they want to use, and all the magic that is really driving that is happening behind the scenes on Netflix's servers, whatever company we're talking about here. So the clients, so your mobile app, your browser app, are talking over an API to those backend systems to get their data. Obviously, in that model, you don't, give everyone's mobile phone doesn't have all the movies and everything like right there with it, right? It's retrieving that data from an external source. So there's that use for an API. Quite often as well, you see APIs being used in what you'd call, back-end business services, which is, very, very widely used across, any industry vertical really, which is, same kind of idea, a HTTP-based API, but they're not for people outside of your organization to use. It's for your own tooling, your own interconnected systems to talk back and forward to one another, your own, you could imagine in the case of, and again, speculating here slightly, in the case of, a telco like Optus or something like that, you could imagine that, they would have a customer API that allowed them to get information about, their users, and that was supposed to be used by, internal tooling they had for their accounts team or something like that for some of the software they use there, those kind of things. So those are probably, and there's, API can mean a lot of things, but that's just kind of when we're thinking about, what could be accidentally placed on the internet or even purposefully placed on the internet in terms of an API for people to potentially poke around it and get some juicy information from. Those are the kind of things that jump kind of straightforward to my mind. So when you're referring to things like happy path testing and that kind of stuff, what they'll be referring to there in that article will be, generally when you build software, especially in this day and age, you're supposed to be doing testing, especially automated testing. Not always for security reasons, that can be a big part of it, but for just ensuring that things functionally work the way that you intend them to, that you're able to have your developers making changes and releasing that rapidly without breaking things, regressing functionality of your system. So happy path testing here would be referring to ensuring that all of your API functionality works as you intend it to do, given the correct web requests and responses that you would expect for the client side to be making to that API. You could, picking examples off the top of my head, say if there was a customer endpoint to this API, and endpoint we mean a URL that you can go to integrate with the API that returns you a list of name, address, phone number, username, password, passport number, all of these kind of things. You would have the happy path testing would be ensuring that there is a test there that says, if you go to this URL with, this format, it returns the expected response of this. A good practice would also be to do things like, doing, I'm an authenticated user. Do I get a response indicating that I'm allowed to do this? What happens if I am not an authenticated user? Do I get, a response that indicates I'm not allowed to make these actions? Things like that. And that stuff is really best practice.
And the way that you laid that out makes me think that perhaps the authenticated user check wasn't in play here, is what the thinking is at the moment.
From what I've read, yeah, that's kind of what people have been honing in on, is that the API itself did not require any form of authentication. This is a very common thing to have happen also, by the way. So this happens to almost any kind of organization of any size, and it may not be an API, but there's been many occasions of basically accidental public exposure of sensitive information. Often these are people hanging a database or a cloud storage bucket or something like that online that doesn't require password authentication to get into, and people stumble across these, and bad things can happen from that. So I think from that quote that you mentioned there, the thing that really jumps out is that they are indicating that they had no form of testing there. So that to me either says two things. Either, they didn't have potentially really good development practices that would have picked up things like that, or maybe they just had the ability to accidentally run this in production without an authentication hanging on the internet, and had no idea that they were doing things, completely accidental exposure that had always been that way. That maybe this wasn't a bug or a vulnerability someone introduced. This could be just how they designed it by accident.
How hard is it to stumble across this? Is it something that you have to probe for? Like would the hacker be probing for this, or could they run some software that might find these kind of vulnerabilities?
That's an interesting question, because you don't. It does depend. Quite often, people will just stumble upon this stuff. Picking another example from, I can't remember exactly when, but a few years back in New Zealand, there was a bit of a media story around, the current year, whatever year this was, the budget was, essentially leaked, and people were saying, this was a data breach and all those kind of things. But what had really happened is someone had accidentally uploaded, that budget information before it was meant to go public. And if I recall correctly, it ended up being exposed because, you could browse to a URL that's like, for example, 2017 budget, and it would have, 3 years ago's budget. 2018 would have 2018's. So someone happened to just put the current year's URL path in and happened to find some information there and go, oh, this is interesting. So it could well be that there was just, some curious person out there that happened to stumble upon this and realize what it was, and potentially decided to do something bad with it. The fact that initially this attacker has disclosed the information on forums where people disclose information, and initially asked for a ransom, all of the for me, all of the steps that actually take this person from just stumbling upon something that was publicly available on the internet to actually being a cyber criminal is those steps, and potential. Again, I haven't seen myself any of these things, just reading what the report said. That actual attempt to extort and to do something malicious with that information indicates that perhaps they are out there looking for things like that. And to answer your question, Nick, about is there software and things like that can help you find this? Absolutely, yeah. People can just it's pretty simple to do, because it's all just using, generally speaking, web HTTP protocol. People will just be basically out there scanning IP addresses and domains for web servers that are running, and basically anything that doesn't give you an access denied, they may look further and just see if there's anything interesting there. And there is various open source tools that will kind of allow you to scrape. This is a lot of what web scraping is just automating what would be manual of just poking around the internet, seeing what's out there. It could be as well that maybe they were an Optus customer, and potentially this API that we're talking about here could be, like I mentioned before, something that's actually supposed to sit behind one of their customer-facing web apps or a mobile app or something like that. And a curious person said, what happens if I poke around a bit, and happen to find something there. So this happens all the time. It's very, very common. It's, I guess, the actions that were taken.
If you get pen testing as a service from some external party, what onus is there on an organization that runs that sort of a service to find these sort of vulnerabilities? Like if they're engaged to, and I don't know if anyone was in this case, and it doesn't matter, but just speaking at a high level, if you engage someone to an entity to do penetration testing for your business, they don't find a vulnerability like this, which is later identified and exploited. I wonder what sort of onus there is on, or legal or otherwise responsibility for that organization to cover the cost.
I think from what I've seen from people that quite often do this is, they will have contracts signed which determine the scope, and also determine that if at some point in the future there is a vulnerability found, they're not going to be liable for not having found something like that. I think, again, if we are assuming that this was as exposed as what these reports are making it out to us to believe, I would hazard to guess that any half decent pen testing firm would be able to find a API that's exposing sensitive information that does not have any authentication required, if it was in fact exposed to the internet.
Pen
So
testing is also only half the puzzle, right? You've got to come around
yep,
and actually remediate on all those points.
yeah, which is, I think, it was always going to be one of my big talking points for today is you can have all of the best dev practices, you can have all of the best, security tooling and all of these kind of things, but if at the end of the day, a pen tester found this and reported it, if there's nobody, if you don't have the capacity, if you don't have, the capability in the organization, or things are not a priority, if they just go onto a big backlog of things to fix, and there's always a burning fire and there's always things to fix, and it never gets in front of someone to fix, then pen testing is not going to do you any good.
It's true. I also think in these situations, there's the technical element, but there's also the incident response piece, and again, we'll get back to maybe the technical part of that as well. But when you claim that you're the victim of a sophisticated cyber attack, and that turns out not to be the case, it's a fairly benign sort of vulnerability that's run of the mill. Again, caveats: if what happened, if what we think happened. I think there's just that PR piece. The more you own it, the more you're authentic in your response, and the more you just think about how can we limit exposure or risk to the end users whose data is involved. I think as a brand, you come out of it looking much better when you claim that some super criminal got the better of you, and could have happened to anyone. No defense could have withstood this attack. It doesn't do good things for the brand.
Absolutely not, and you see it time and time again. I think as I guess you do need to feel for these organizations that have had this happen.
I feel for their teams. I don't know about the execs. I definitely feel for the people on the ground.
Yeah, it's never a good situation, right?
There'd be a lot of pressure up top.
Yeah, it's no one's having a good day basically when any of this is happening. But I do agree with you that it does go a very long way having that transparency there, having clear and consistent comms, also letting your users or the public know, who are actually doing, your incident response, things like that. Knowing, telling the rest of your team like the things to say. So I think everyone should, if you are working at an organization and you're in charge of security, or if you're running a business, you have to assume breach. You have to assume something bad is going to happen at some point. So you need to have your incident response, from a technical perspective, but really from a PR, from a comms, from just be good to your customers' point of view as well. I think we saw it the other week as well with the Uber breach as well. The kind of lack of transparency you see up front when people are kind of in panic mode, and then it comes to light what actually happened, just kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. So, I mean, I don't have all the answers. It must be a difficult situation to be in. But yeah, I think companies should be focusing on this and trying to do better for sure.
Optus has done a really good job of having a short 4-minute succinct video on what's happening, where they're at, who they're working with, and who it's impacted, basically. And it's just a really good takeaway in probably some of the most layman's terms of what's happened. And I think that's a really good way to present it to the market, as to here's what we're doing.
Oh, they have done that? Okay.
And there's a dedicated webpage for it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's quite a good way of doing it. For what I've been reading is that there had been a bit of discontent around the place based on them just sending potentially affected customers a single email saying, hey, this is what's happening. People are kind of where's a website, where's something, where can I get some help? So that's good to hear.
How many spin-off scams and phishing attempts have probably popped up off that as well? It's
that does happen. Yep.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of people getting emails, even most likely genuine emails, but then going into the stores to go, what's this? Why am I getting this? Is it real? Can you help me? You're a human. You're right here. I know this definitely isn't fraud, and it's probably just getting overwhelmed with work. But just going back to, okay, how do you get in front of something like this, stop it from happening? Essentially, we've got penetration testing. That makes sense. I've got some notes in front of me that are from you, Darryl, around bug bounty programs. I don't know what that is. Red team, purple teaming. Don't know what that is. Outsource this stuff to an MSSP. If too expensive in-house, I understand what that is. We can come back to it. Run me through those first two.
Yeah. So bug bounty. This is a really interesting one. So I read again, an article. Should probably be quoting these things that I read it from.
Meh.
Can't remember where. But basically, it was supposed correspondence with the leaker of this information, where they said, hey, if Optus had a place or a way for me to report this vulnerability, I would have done it. So that's actually really a valid thing. So a bug bounty program is basically where you operate a reward for reporting security issues.
I should have said I don't know what it is.
Platform.
It's all in the name, so I don't know what the hell I was on about. But yes,
exactly. Yeah. So multiple ways of doing this. Quite often you're like a big company, so you think your Facebooks, your Googles, your Apples, things like that. They have their own bug bounty programs where anyone can just go in there and go, hey, security team, I found this bug. You provide information, it's verified by the security teams, and you actually do get a payout if it's proven to be, of different levels of payout based on severity and things like that.
I know Tesla had one of those, and didn't someone report one to Tesla, but they basically went, not paying you? I just remember seeing some article about that in like Wired or something last year.
That can quite often be the case. It depends on, I guess, if you're running a good bug bounty program, you're going to have a set of rules, a set of sort of criteria that you're happy for it to cover. So probably the most important piece, I think, of talking about bug bounties is, how can your average organization use something like this? Because I think it's remarkably valuable. So there's actually services out there now that offer, bug bounty program as a service. So basically, they have that centralization, that layer of abstraction over running your own bug bounty program. So the big players out there that are quite popular would be outfits like HackerOne, Bugzilla, and things like that, which basically a service where you as a company sign up and say, I want to run a bug bounty program. But then also cybersecurity researchers, white hat hackers, people like that sign up as well to be, bug hunters. And then essentially there's, a whole bunch of good stuff in the middle where you go, this is the type of stuff that's in scope. These are my domains and IP addresses that I want people to look at, all that kind of stuff. And then the hackers that are part of that program then, see, hey, XYZ company's now on here. I can go and start looking at the stuff that's in their scope. And then they find bugs and they file it through, say, the HackerOne platform. And that ends up sending emails or tickets through to your security team to remediate. And once you're verified, then payouts and things like that can happen from the HackerOne program directly to the security researchers.
It seems like a really cost-effective way to go about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because again, it's that whole idea of you spread that cost wide across a large number of organizations. And the other cool thing about it as well is that you don't actually have to pay any actual money for these if you don't want to. So the cool thing about these platforms is they kind of gamify the whole bug hunting thing. So you can imagine you're just getting into the world of penetration testing, looking to get some experience, looking to get a name out there, some stuff to put on your CV. Sign up to HackerOne, and they have a whole XP, experience points kind of thing. So if you're a company and you want people to test your security, but you don't necessarily have the resources to even offer financial rewards at all, you can offer experience points. So you'll have people find bugs, file them. If they get a valid bug, they'll get however many experience points. And then these platforms often do things like, if you get over X level of experience points, then you'll get invited to higher paying programs and things like that. So basically, if you're a company that doesn't want to pay out, you're not going to get the most experienced people because, your really top gun penetration testers are going to be in it for the dollars, right? They're not going to be worried about their XP because they've already got heaps of XP. So they'll be going on the big bounty payouts, getting invited to all the exclusive programs and things like that, whereas people who are less experienced will be looking to gain that experience. But it's a really, really effective way of doing it, and to be honest, the benefits of it are pretty amazing. You hire once a year or whenever you want to do it some external penetration testing firm to come in and do testing. That's great. They'll probably find things, they'll probably help you out, but having just a very diverse set of eyes on your platform from all around the world, potentially continuously as well, right? There could always be someone testing. There's always a new, someone with new ideas having a look, and it's something that you don't have to kind of schedule once a year or
Yeah.
once every 5 years or whatever. And a lot of people that do this stuff really effectively will still do let's hire a pen testing consultant to come in, but they'll also have a bug bounty program. It's that defense in depth. It's approach it from multiple angles.
Makes sense. All right. Well, the one that I definitely don't understand on the face of it, red team, purple teaming. Run us through that.
So that there, I made some notes on. If you're an organization that has a very mature security posture already, being you have either resource or your outsourced resource to actually take care of your business and from a security point of view. So you have defenders, you have technology in place that can help prevent attacks. So the idea of red teaming is, red teaming or adversary emulation is when you actually get people to do a kind of no holds barred or very realistic long-term attack against your organization. Kind of comes from the military term of like a red team. So they'd have a dedicated set of soldiers that would attempt to sneak into a military base as the red team, and it's all about testing the defenses, actually testing what you call your blue team, your defense team, actually seeing if all that technology you've paid for, all of the expertise, all the processes, all the run books, all the documentation is actually fit for purpose. So obviously, no point in doing anything like this if you don't actually have the ability to respond to incidents in real time. So it is something for people that are mature, but it allows you to do things like a lot of it comes down to adversary emulation. So you go, I want to pretend that we are being attacked by a ransomware outfit. People go as far as naming specific adversaries. There is frameworks in place. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is a big one, which is basically maps attack techniques to known adversaries. So you can kind of put together an exercise based on how well do our defenses stack up against XYZ attack method, and you actually have this red team come in and perform that and basically try and hack you. And this is going as far as you will allow social engineering. You may allow people to sneak into your office and break into your data center, to ring up your admin staff on front of house there and ask for the keys to the kingdom, things like that, because you're testing your ability to respond to a potential incident. The purple teaming thing comes in when you mix a red team and blue team. So blue team defenders, red team attackers. So the idea of purple teaming is everybody knows what's happening, and the red team will go, hey, we tried this thing, we were able to get this far. Did you see us in did your incident system light up with logs for us trying this? No, it didn't. Oh, maybe we should work together to figure out how to get this exact type of attack lighting up like a Christmas tree in your security operations center, basically.
Okay.
So very effective. But yeah, it is for people that are kind of beyond your basics.
Yeah. So we've covered off several options there that allow you to take a proactive stance in terms of cybersecurity, scaling from fairly continuous but almost pay per play type approach to finding bugs and having a bit more time to respond to that vulnerability, right through to pretty much continuous real-time mitigation. Continuous, challenging of your security posture and real-time mitigation. So there's ways to approach it that scale right through the range of businesses, resource and size. I guess the one thing across all of those, though, is it's not a single point in time approach to cybersecurity. It's continuous. It's continually evolving, as are your systems, therefore so are the risks. So with that said, how does that tie into the whole Cybersecurity Awareness Month that we now find ourselves in? What part, if any, does that have to play in your mind in the industry that we work within?
It's good that there's an awareness month. It is better than no awareness. And drawing people's attention to things that aren't, spending their attention on this kind of stuff is got to be a good thing. But it's one of those things, that we've talked about. It's, I say, you hire someone to come and do a pen test once every year or every 5 years or something like that. It's, security is not about, hey, it's Security Awareness Month. Let's make sure we book the pen testers this month because, we've got to be aware that it's happening. If you're responsible for privacy, responsible for security, it's responsible for engineering, development, all those things. If you play a part in keeping your business secure, which, let's face it, every one of your team members do, right? If you answer phones, everything, you've got to buy into this stuff, and it's got to be something you're continuously getting better at, learning, developing. You can't just, once a year or whatever, sit down and go, what's our budget for security this year? Cool, we'll book some pen testers in. What's a hot new security platform out there? Let's pay some money and get people to come in and da 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 da. Because one, if you're not buying into it at an organizational level, anything that comes out of those, those things you're spending money and time on, you're not going to action them. You're not going to set them as a priority. You're not going to be aware, so you're not going to get the benefit of them. It's also all about that sort of defense in depth, continually improving your processes, things like that. So that's something that everyone needs to get on board with. You can't just be like, oh, it's the security people's problem to make everything secure. There's no, you can't just pay some money and tick a box and then be secure. You have to operate from a assume breach. Bad things are going to happen. That's just the world we live in now.
Something you talked to me about, Nick, I can't remember which episode it was in, but the idea of going around the teams inside the business and understanding what their role looks like, how they use the systems, the network and the apps and the software, and just understanding, the risks that they face and that they have to mitigate and maybe the knowledge gaps that there are. I just think that, there's a lot of technical elements to this, but so much of it's human, and that's where so much of the risk exists. And maybe that's one of the big takeaways for Cybersecurity Awareness Month is, you don't have to teach people like you, Darryl, that there's a risk. You don't have to remind you that you need to be constantly addressing it, but it's the people who don't have direct responsibility, but do have a part to play in that piece that I think maybe this month is really targeted at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, everyone that's working at your organization that, is a good employee and has the best intentions, no one wants this bad stuff happening, right? Like everyone wants, wants things to keep going in a secure way. But quite often it's just that there's no organizational level from the top down, like awareness and procedures. Like if you were, for example, answering the phones at a telco or something like that, and there was something that you thought was a bit fishy, is this someone potentially trying to attack us? Is there something dodgy going on? If you don't know, what do I do in this situation? Like how do I get help? How do our customers get help? Who do I talk to? What do we do when there is, potential for a cybersecurity incident? I think having an awareness month is really helpful for that kind of thing, especially from leaders out there, just to go, do we have the right procedures in place? The right, do we have an incident response policy? Like who's in charge of what? What are the people involved here? Does everybody know what to do? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately we've had trouble with Nick's feed and not getting a lot of input from him. So he did give me some numbers earlier on. Some updated numbers actually from Optus. So they confirmed there are about 2.1 million customers that had at least one form of current and valid identification of personal information accessed by hackers. That included about 900,000 customers who had numbers from expired identification documents stolen, as well as personal information. With the data of about 9.8 million customers caught up in the cyber attack, there are more than 7.7 million people who did not have ID numbers accessed by the hackers. So I'm sure those 7.7 million people will be very relieved. Again, the thing for me is there's only 25 million people in Australia. They won't have 10 million customers. They don't have that sort of market share. So I guess the other thing is, how long do you hold former customer data for, right?
Yeah, that's what I was reading as well, that given the length of time that potentially this information has been held onto, it was something like, I think, they were saying something like 40% of the potential population has the ability for, at least it may be well expired by now and old addresses and all that kind of stuff, old passwords, whatever, but still, that's a lot of people.
So many.
That's a lot of information to hang on to for a large number of years.
Yeah, and that's probably where it gets weird for me, is just that whole governance piece, right? Like how are we looking after our data? What data are we keeping? Having a really clear approach to it. And that's the part that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But the other thing that sort of strikes me is whoever this person is, based on media reporting again of the conversations that are happening in some way, shape, or form with this alleged hacker, just sounds like a bit of a novice. It's just that the numbers being asked for aren't huge. It's almost like they stumbled across it, went, "Oh God, what do I do now?" And then kind of threw out a number, and it's like $1 million. It's not, in the scheme of things, for the size of it, it's like it's not a lot. I don't know. Just
feels like that Austin Powers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
You
sure you know what Austin yeah, I'll give you a second go.
Yeah, well, to be honest, this has really been a little bit of a theme over the last little bit with a lot of these data breaches that have been reported. You look at like the Uber and the Rockstar Games data leaks breaches over the last few weeks, going back for I guess a year and a bit now. An adversary group that we're calling Lapsus is it turns out that these are teenage kids. Again, not they're asking for money and things like that, but it seems like the primary motivation is the classic hacker motivation that you don't see, or you haven't seen a whole lot of recently, which is just kind of getting notoriety, just breaching companies and messing with people for the lols, as they said. Yeah,
it's all about them lols.
Yeah. Like in the Uber breach, apparently they breached the Slack and were trolling staff members there and things like that. That doesn't cry professional cyber criminal operation.
No, which of course is plenty of. Yeah, but it's crazy.
Exactly.
The lack of professionalism makes it even more scary. That it's
exactly.
And
all of the supposed methods of access in those very recent breaches have been surprisingly not technically sophisticated. A lot of very basic phishing, stolen credentials, very basic social engineering, things like that, and potentially, by what people are saying about Optus, just very basic bad IT hygiene, bad development practices, potentially.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, a lot of hearsay from us, a lot of based on what's reporting. So again, huge disclaimer. We don't know really what happened. We're going off what we're hearing. So, and all the best to people on the ground at Optus. Genuinely, it would suck. And I hope they're all doing okay. All right.
Cool. And it's just given it's Cybersecurity Awareness Week, it's kind of a good excuse just to talk about some ideas behind, application and API security and, different ways you can aim to make your product more secure by, taking some of these approaches.
Absolutely. All right, mate. It's been great to have you on. Thank you for helping us out with some expertise. Much needed. Sorely missed in another episode, but we appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Cool. And thanks for having me.
All good.